What's up, guys? We are back with another Masters of the Universe Masterverse review, and we're taking a look at two Revolution figures today, which may or may not be the best timing because I still have not actually watched it yet, as ridiculous as that may sound. But we're taking a look at He-Man and Skeletor today. This is, of course, Battle Armor He-Man, and this is the new Skeletor, which is also called skele-tek. Pretty much everywhere except on the packaging here. Now, these guys do come in the new format style packaging, which I really like, and I cannot stress that enough. Was not a big fan of the previous style of artwork and packaging. This really just showcases fantastic artwork across the board. So you've got the figure in a relatively small window that just gives us excellent artwork that is character specific, that wraps around the front to the back. You've got a big product shot on the back for the figure, as well as a showcase of the accessories and somewhat of how they move, as well as a cross-sell for other recent figures. So yeah, let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Revolution Masterverse figures. So we got a new He-Man, Battle Armor He-Man, and then we've got the skele-tek, as he's called everywhere, but like on this box, basically, I think. The new Skeletor. Again, I've still not watched the show as of doing this video. Kind of spoilery, I suppose, at least based on some of the stuff that's on the He-Man box, but that's not a big deal. So we're going to run through these individually because, of course, they are different figures. Like, they aren't even close to the same when it comes to construction. I want to start with Skeletor first, so we're going to knock him out, and then we'll get to He-Man. So for our Skeletor figure, he's obviously very different from a lot of other Skeletors, and very different from Masterverse in general, just because of his construction. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. He's still fairly standard, but at the same time, he deviates from the norm in some weird ways. So we got a head that can look up slightly. He looks down better than he can look up. You got a little tilt side to side. You got your rotation. Arm goes out at the shoulder. It swivels. We do have a bicep swivel here. You've got your double jointed elbow. Pretty decent range. Better than 90. You got hinges, you got swivel at the wrist. Now this is obviously where it's different. So it hinges outward a little bit, and it swivels. It doesn't have any joints in it because it is a bendy piece. It's pliable enough, but it's not like the most super bendy thing you have ever experienced, but it does work fairly well. And one thing I do like is that it seems to stay. When you actually bend it like that, it seems to want to stay. And then you've got the ram's head here at the end that swivels, and then you've got the jaw that can open up. So whatever this thing is in the context of the show, that's what it is here. It's pretty cool. I like it. And it's very different. It adds a bit of a design change for sure. We've still got our diaphragm cut, so it goes forward and backward, side to side. Swivel point as well. There is still a waist twist down here, but it's actually kind of hard to engage because of this skirt piece. Skirt piece obviously hinders the legs. He can only go out so far. Really can't kick his legs far forward at all, except for the right, your left. There is a thigh twist up here. You can also swivel at the top of the knee here. You can swivel at the shin still. And then you've got these really crazy knees that hinge forward and backward. The skirt piece, of course, does get in the way, but you can do something like that if you want to get weird with it. And then down at the ankles, you've still got pretty decent rocker and really good hinges down here too. So he does move pretty well. However, once you actually really start to kind of pose him dynamically, a lot of that's going to come to a halt because of that skirt. And because of the fact that you've got that super rigid arm that only bends a little bit, but it still looks fairly cool when you've got him posed up. Now, when it comes to the overall look and feel here, I think this is where the figure truly shines. Like, if you want this figure, it's likely because of the way he looks and the fact that it's so different. You know, we've had a lot of Skeletor variants for the past 40 years. This one is very much its own thing. Honestly, I kind of get like a 2000 XE vibe out of this thing, which is kind of cool. I know that may not be for everybody because it is a little over the top in some ways. Like, he is very much kind of over-designed, but it also feels like something that was designed with the intent of making a toy. Maybe something that, dare I say, someone might actually want to play with and not just throw on a shelf. So I do think he actually looks pretty cool. There is obviously a lot of unique stuff here, if not the entire figure being unique. Maybe something like the thighs isn't or something like that, but he is overwhelmingly unique parts. I really like the way he looks. It's a big departure for Skeletor, but it's not too out there when you think about some of the other stuff we've gotten. Paint on him looks really nice. He does have a lot of little details, you know, like the rimming on the skirt piece. All of these little, like, I don't know, you want to call them techno line work pieces that he's got there. I do like the very Darth Maul, you know, lower legs, robo leg kind of situation going on here. Nice sort of shiny metallics for that. I do really like whatever this thing is. Despite, its articulation challenges, I think it's rad, I think it's fun, and it's different. I do like the fact that the bendy wire in here is bendy enough that it does work, it does function, and it stays. That's kind of just important from a play factor. I love the ram's head on the end. This is the thing really that makes me kind of think of 2000X. Like, I could have seen this 20 years ago and been like, absolutely, that's something they would make a toy out of. But I really think it's fun, it's different. It's very much in line with Masterverse, but he also feels like one of the newer progression kind of figures for Masterverse, where they're going in the right way with some of this design work. Colors are good, still very much a Skeletor figure, but also his own thing. And then of course you've got your head sculpt up here, which is again kind of leaning in that direction. This one makes me kind of think about, maybe the tail end of He-Man from the 80s, or something like that, intergalactic Skeletor, stuff like that from Classics line, where he is kind of technoed up. You can only see part of his face. You've still got the classic Skeletor look, but then there's techno bits and bobs up there. And then of course you've got your hood, which is draped over him really well. I like the way it sits. It's obviously part of the head sculpt in a way, but it does sit over him nicely. Gives a little bit of a mysterious look to him also. Makes him seem a little bit more menacing for a change. So I do think, in a general sense, he looks really fun. He's very different. Good paint, good sculpt. Very much something that kind of sets him apart from a lot of other Masterverse figures as of late for me. Where this figure is likely lacking, well, not likely, he is lacking, is the accessories. He doesn't really come with anything. Again, I don't want to say this 100 times, but I haven't watched a show, so I don't really know what he is or isn't supposed to have. Maybe he doesn't have a lot of stuff. I think it's okay because he does have the crazy arm, but he does include 2 accessories. You do get an extra fist for his left hand, so you don't have just that sort of slightly gripping hand, so you get an extra hand. And then you get this crown. I don't even know where it comes from. Maybe, King Randor or something like that. I don't know. But you do get a crown that fits over top of the hood. It actually does sit pretty nicely. If you want to gussy up your Skeletor, you can do that. But otherwise, he's fairly complete, right out of the box. Now, as far as our He-Man, our most powerful man in the universe, he is, well, he's fairly comparable to a lot of other He-Man figures. He is still a little bit better. I might go as far as to say that this is one of the best, if not the best, He-Man figures that we've gotten in this line. I really do like this. He's not perfect, though, and that's mostly down to the battle armor and how it sort of, well, it does sort of encumber him a little bit. So that's to be expected, I imagine. So as far as articulation goes, head is kind of locked down. He can look, well, neutral, that's sort of up, down pretty good. Not really any tilt, though, because of the armor, and then you've got swivel. He's very standard Masterverse beyond this. So arms out at the shoulders, they swivel. You got a bicep swivel. We've got double jointed elbows. This side has the bracer, the gauntlet, so it's going to get in the way a little bit. Otherwise, range is nice. You've got your hinges, rotation at the wrist, normal stuff there. The torso is only going to have a waist twist because of the armor. It is removable, and we'll talk about this when we get to accessories because there's a whole other component to this figure. But this is really only going to swivel because the diaphragm cut is basically locked in place there. Legs are going to go out all the way. They kick forward all the way. They kick backwards. You've got your thigh twist. You've got double jointed knees, of course. Normal stuff here. You've got a boot cut down there, very nicely hidden. And then you got rocker. You got hinges at those ankles. So very normal Masterverse, like nothing really crazy, nothing missing, but certainly nothing extra either. Articulation is not going to be the area where he shines, but overall, he does move fairly well. And when you get that armor off of him, as I'll show later, he does move really well beyond that. Now, as far as the overall look and feel, this is kind of the area where he's going to excel, I think, at least in comparison to some of the other He-Man figures. Accessories are also a high point for this guy. But in terms of the visuals, it's going to be 2 major things, the head sculpt and the armor, because otherwise he is very much just, like a standard He-Man. There's not anything too crazy here. And I do really like the way this particular body looks with the battle armor. I was not a big fan of the new Eternia battle armor He-Man. That one, that was like one of the early release Walmart figures. Wasn't a big fan of that. It was mostly the head sculpt on that one. I think this is a better head sculpt. I don't know that it's the best. He still isn't perfect. It's like the weird thing with this line that they can't seem to nail He-Man much at all, but they can get a lot of other figures really well done. So I'm kind of focusing heavily on the armor. And there's honestly maybe not a lot to focus on. It is a two-sided piece, so you can pop it apart at the shoulders and then at the waist, just like any other, you can pop it apart. And we'll talk about this when we get to accessories, because it does make him look a little bit more exciting to me. Like, this is definitely a more interesting version of He-Man by virtue of him having this armor. It's got a nice pearly metallic sheen. There is some paint on it to kind of bring out that sculpt, and there's a little bit of texturing on it. It does have removable chest plates, and we'll talk about that as well. So you can, you know, actually give him battle damage. But I do really like it. It makes him bulky. It beefs him up a little bit. I do think, however, that complicates things a little bit because it does make him bulkier at the torso, and then it makes his head look a little bit small to me. When the armor is off, I think it looks a lot better. The head sculpt is different. You know, it's one of those things where we haven't gotten really a consistent He-Man head and face in this line at all. I think the head sculpt and the face on this one is pretty good. Where I think things get a little bit let down is the hair, because it just looks like something that's sort of slapped on top. It looks better farther away, if that makes any sense. But the face, I think, is pretty well done. It's very, you know, Revolution-esque. It's certainly better than the first He-Man that we got that was specifically tied to the cartoon. Eyes look really good. There's a little bit of shading on the face. The hair, though, has this sort of like, I don't know, almost oily look to it because of the wash they put in there. I would have preferred it not have that at all. Otherwise, I do think the face and the head sculpt is one of the better ones we've gotten. And then the rest of this figure, you know, again, is kind of just a standard He-Man. You've got the one bracer, you've got the one gauntlet, you've got a furry loincloth, and then you've got some furry boots, and then an otherwise almost naked man. So he does look pretty solid, mostly focusing on that chest armor. I think it looks really good. It's very beefy and bulky, and it certainly looks like something that came out of the Revolution shows. Now, as far as accessories goes, this is where I think the figure kind of gets elevated, especially if we're going to compare him to the Skeletor figure. And I don't know if we should, but I'm talking about him at the same time. And that Skeletor figure includes, you know, almost nothing. It's very minimal by comparison. This figure includes everything to make him a regular He-Man, which honestly I didn't realize. I almost threw the accessories away because of how they're packaged in this box, so kind of watch out for that. But you do get the standard He-Man harness. And honestly, I think this guy looks really solid with the standard He-Man getup on. I think this looks really good. A lot of that does come down to the proportions of the head to the body. Like I said, I thought the head looked a little small with the armor on, but with the standard harness, I think he looks a lot more proportional. He looks bulky and beefy and like a super hunky He-Man right here. So I really like that. It also fixes some of the articulation issues. So the head can look up and down and tilt side to side slightly better, but then you also can afford to use, you know, the actual diaphragm cut. So you can change him up. If you just wanted him to look like this, you've got a full-fledged He-Man here. He doesn't include exactly everything, though, and that's kind of the spoilery thing I mentioned earlier that's on the package, and I guess, you know, in here. So we do get some other stuff for him also. It's not just the harness. We get some extra hands. He comes with 2 fists. So you've got gripping hands on him in the box, 2 fists. I've got the armor here because I did say that this includes separate chest pieces. It doesn't have an action feature or anything like that, and you only get one. But you can pop this out, and then you've got a battle damaged version that can pop in. So you've got the big cut across the chest, which of course, you know, you have to have this. I'd be annoyed at minimum if it didn't include something like this. So I'm happy to see that. Looks good. You know, a hallmark thing for Battle Armor He-Man. And then he also includes the axe. So this is the only weapon he gets because apparently he loses the sword at some point in the show. And either I forgot he did that in Revelation, or I, you know, again, haven't watched the show yet. So spoiler alert, I guess, but it's on the box. So he comes with the battle axe, and this looks really good. I'm very much happy with this sculpt. It's a little bit more ornate. It's got some nicks and cuts, but it's also got a decent bit of paint on it also. And then, of course, as usual, you know, you could try to stuff it down in there if you wanted. It doesn't actually have a slot in the back, but you can finagle it in there. But it does look like a really solid axe overall. And he holds this very snugly in either of those hands. So he does come with quite a bit of stuff. Like I mentioned, you're essentially getting 2 versions of He-Man in one. The only thing you're missing, of course, is a power sword, but if you're like me, you probably have an abundance of them laying around if you've been buying this line long enough. So yeah, overall, I think both of these 2 figures are pretty solid. They don't really necessarily reinvent anything when it comes to Masterverse, but they both feel like the newer style of Masterverse figures, if that makes any sense. They definitely feel different from that early handful of waves and feel like something that maybe have a little bit more oomph to them, if that makes sense. He-Man in particular, I think, is one of the better He-Man figures we've gotten out of this line. Skeletor is so wildly different, I'm not sure that comparison is warranted, but he's pretty fun on his own. And if anything, you know, this design kind of screamed toy to me, so I'm really happy to see it actually in figure form. And it does work pretty well. At the bare minimum, he looks fantastic. He-Man comes with some really solid accessories. Skeletor, not so much, of course, so there's maybe kind of a give and a take when it comes to these two. So that's going to do it for this look at the Masters of the Universe Masterverse Revelation, Battle Armor, He-Man, and Skeletor. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.